4 years in the making here. Brexit Day, as it's being called, is now just over the horizon this Friday, and several certainties are finally beginning to take shape. First, let's talk about the actual terms of that withdrawal agreement that was reached, starting with the repeal of the European Communities Act of 1972. What this will effectively mean is that the UK will eventually have to pull out of the European single market, losing access to free trade with the EU, which currently receives about 45% of the nation's exports. Now, there is room there, of course, to negotiate a free trade agreement later on, things similar to NAFTA or the USMCA, but ultimately they will not be able to be fully integrated into any European market. This repeal will also mean that the UK will no longer be held to the ruling of EU courts, one of the conditions most sought after by pro-Brexiteers, in addition to the agreement in addition to an agreement that stipulates a financial settlement of 35 billion euros paid to the EU by the UK to settle its prior obligations within the Union. Lastly, and arguably the most important detail here, is the legislation of what's being called the implementation period. Now, while the UK will officially be independent of the EU come January 31st, the implementation period is designed to have quite the opposite effect, at least until its expiration on December 31st of this year. Important to note, however, is that there is one final step before any of this is put into motion, and that is for the European Parliament to vote on the agreement this Wednesday. That being said, the overwhelming consensus among analysts is that we can expect withdrawal to be moving forward.
All right, so Augustus, it looks like Brexit is moving forward. You talked about this implementation period, saying it arguably is one of the most important parts of this. What is that implementation period going to look like?
Well, I think it would actually be more aptly called a transition period. Effectively, what it's going to do is narrow the blow of the effects that are immediately going to occur after Brexit Day arrives this Friday. Now, what that's going to mean is that despite officially being independent from the EU, the United Kingdom will still be under the jurisdiction of EU courts and will still, for a time being, fall within the single market of the European Union. Now, that, of course, will expire on December 31st, but it gives the UK time to adjust before it fully withdraws from the European Union.
Now, obviously we've heard a lot from the British perspective, leave, remain, and all of the debate that has gone on there, but what about the EU? How have other EU governments reacted to all this?
I would probably describe it overall with apprehension. Of course, throughout this entire process, we've heard misgivings of various European leaders, various European sentiments that, while are respectful of the UK's decision to leave the European Union, really see little benefit to the EU as a whole by the UK making this decision to withdraw.
And it sounds like we actually might be reaching the end of this Brexit saga, one that began back in 2016 with a referendum. Do you think this is actually the end? I mean, we've heard about this on and off for the past 4 years.
Oh, make no mistake, we are definitely within the final chapter of Brexit here, despite how long this implementation period might be. Assuming this vote goes through in the European Parliament and does pass and is signed into law, we're absolutely within the end of essentially this Brexit saga that's persisted for so many years now.